All right, so let me ask you guys this. What are you, maybe it's a little early to even, because we're still kind of thinking parts and stuff. But let me just ask you, what are you guys listening to as you play? How do you, like, what's going through your head in terms of my ears?
There's a lot of drone, a lot of E-drone through this.
Yeah.
So I'm listening to a lot.
Can you talk in your mic, buddy?
There's a lot of drone,
Yeah.
like an E-drone through this. So James is hanging out on an E a lot through this. But Zach is covering a lot of, where you see it's like a B over E. So there's a B chord going on up here in Zach's voicings. And so if I just sit and listen to James the whole time, which I'm sure you're touching on the changes too, but I need to be listening to him to hear the changes. Otherwise all you hear is...
So harmonically, you're saying it's not just one thing. You're taking both and trying to take both of those in at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. How about you, James? Like in terms of feel too, or like anything?
Trying to kind of, I've tried to have a balanced mix right now. I think the only reason that that if I'm in a musical situation where I start pulling things back really, low to really low volumes, is if there's a weak link somewhere, in the band, but everything sounds good. So I've got I'm trying to have a balanced mix, although I tend to kind of de-emphasize the vocals against like sort of the track just for rhythmic, feel. So I've got I've got Scott, Tim. I mean, it's all kind of there. And I'm trying to, kind of hear. Yes, like what Tim said. You're outlining the changes mostly. Sorry, since Zach is, the musical director in this situation, in this worship team, I always want to make sure I have a good bit of the instrument that the musical director is playing, because if they start changing things up, or I want to really be keyed in on what they're doing, but at the same time I'm always definitely going to be linked to the drummer, just because that's my role as well. But I like to hear everything. I like loud rock guitar too, so trying to have a balanced mix, I guess,
Yeah.
Unless there's really a reason for turning something down.
Scott, what do you think, man?
How many of you guys have access to like your own mix as opposed to when you're playing in, how many of you play in a worship setting in your church? Almost everybody. When you're playing, even if you're not, wherever you're playing, do you have your own mix, or are you basically relying on somebody else to give it to you? Okay, here's the danger. All of us, I think everybody would agree with this. The danger is that when you've got your own controller, even when you have a pliable mix engineer who's kind of willing to do whatever you ask him to do, the tendency is to maybe get too much of yourself, where you can't really hear what else is going on. And if there's one common denominator in playing music well together, it is listening, being able to hear what everybody else is doing. So you have to fight the urge. Obviously, you've got to be able to hear yourself, or you start playing harder or louder than maybe you ought to. But you've got to be able to hear what everybody else is doing, because it really informs and inspires your musical headspace and what you choose to play. And particularly in a praise and worship setting, it's just so crucial that everybody's on the same page, that everybody's listening to each other, because what the congregation gets out of the experience, I have a theory that even the most tone-deaf person in the congregation still has this innate sixth sense, knowing when something is totally screwed up in the band. Like, for instance, if you play an E chord over it, what's supposed to be an F sharp chord, everybody knows that's wrong. Even a NASA rocket scientist who has no idea what music is supposed to sound like. So I'm a big believer that you should really be able to hear everything that's going on. Obviously, there have to be limits. If you've got too much of the singer or too much guitar and you're the drummer, then it's hard for you to hone in on what you're doing. But I want to hear everybody. In particular, I want to hear the bass player, because he and I are kind of the primary team. We're laying the foundation for everybody else, and if we're not together, then you're building your house on sand. But I need to be able to hear at least a good amount of everything, so that, because I'm particularly inspired by what guitar players come up with in settings like this. So I really want to hear what, I'm sorry, what's your name? Tim. Sorry, it was a bad joke. I really want to hear what Tim's doing because that's going to really, really tell me where I need to go in the next section. So anyway, we'll get into a whole lot. That could lead me off on a whole bunch of other rabbit trails.